After that, we will go into doing a quick online tour of the application so you can see what the Zoom Grants application looks like. We will, you're not going to see a lot of changes from last year. It's going to be pretty similar. And we're going to take a pause to answer any questions you have related to eligibility or the application. And then I want to spend the last chunk of our time walking through the qualifying expenditures worksheet and going over some highlights there. And then at the end, we'll have time for more questions. So that is our agenda for today. But first, some updates I wanted to share with you all. And you're going to be seeing these in some different places, but just as a reminder, first a note on the ZAP 2021 application review process. As I just said, we understand this is a crazy time, and many of you, all of you, are faced with a lot of unknowns because this is a pretty unprecedented time. But we understand that, and our board is prepared to be mindful of that and flexible, understanding that many of you are going to be writing this application, not knowing necessarily what next year will look like. The nice thing about this process, though, is the way we structure the questions, the way we structure the qualifying expenditures worksheet, is it really does look backwards. So this is a good year to really highlight, the successes you've had up to this point. And if you have any plans moving into the future, sharing what you know to the best of your ability is also appreciated. But please know we understand this is a weird time, and especially next year, we understand that the canceled events and the canceled activities this year will be impacting your budget then. So we, of course, as ZAP and as the Tier 1 Advisory Board, will continue to be very mindful of this and supportive in whatever way we can. So I can't stress that enough. The second point on here is I have 2020 projections coming soon. We are hoping to have these out to you in the next couple of weeks. All your organizations received a notification in early April that the ZAP overall revenue is projecting a 20% shortfall. So this is going to impact all of your awards, and we are currently finalizing what those look like. So we will be reaching out to you soon with more information on that. And then also this month, you will receive your first payment. The third bullet point on here is just a reminder to be posting your canceled and virtual events on Now Plan Utah. That is a great one-stop shop for all of us to make sure we're being consistent in where our events live. I know the state relies on that to look at what's going on. We rely on that, and we both require it as part of our application. So thank you for using that as your resource. And then some COVID resources for you. You've seen a lot of these from the state and the Cultural Alliance, but I want to make sure you are aware of the Salt Lake County COVID portal. I believe Jen is posting some of these links in the chat window, so check those out if you haven't already. We have statewide cultural resources through the Utah Arts and Museums website. I know many of you have probably already seen those as well. And then just a reminder about the weekly Utah Cultural Sector Update webinar. These are held every Monday at 3:30 p.m. We know we've offered some great resources on there. The state and Utah Cultural Alliance have been wonderful partners in that. They are now switching these calls to every other week. So the call for Monday, May 11th is canceled, and the next call will be scheduled for May 18th. So we hope you can join us then. And finally, a few new cultural funding opportunities that you may have seen just recently announced. West Staff Cares Relief Fund is now open, and it is a rolling deadline until the funding is exhausted. The Utah Arts and Museums Care Funding those applications are opening on Monday, May 11th, along with the Utah Humanities Cares Funding, and that application is opening on Monday, May 11th as well. And Jen, I believe, is sharing those links in the chat window, so please check that out. And then just getting into more of our content here. This is the ZAP team. You know us. We love working with you. This is the best way to reach us right now is through email, because we are and have been working remotely. We know, again, many of you are you're writing this application while you're juggling many other activities and figuring out what the rest of your year looks like. So please know we are here for you to answer any questions you have about the application. We also would love to hear from you in general. If there's anything you want to share with us, any anxieties you are having, things you might want to talk through with us, please reach out to us. We are here for you, and we want to hear from you. Okay, so the next, I'd like to introduce an overview of our extended staff is the Tier 1 Advisory Board. This picture is actually a couple years old and we have some new board members, but I know you're going to love working with them this year. They're a fabulous group. So the Tier 1 Advisory Board is responsible for reviewing and scoring the applications. It's a 7-member board and they serve a term for 3 years. So what happens is we basically typically have spent the summer assigning your organization a lead reviewer from this 7-member group, and then they will go and conduct a site visit, usually attending a board meeting. And then they will meet in the fall, usually September, October, to have an all-day board meeting where they finalize their funding recommendations. We realized this year that's going to have to look a little different, and we are flexible to working with you. We are anticipating we would still assign organizations a lead reviewer, but we also could be flexible in terms of maybe instead of a site visit, the board member jumps on a Zoom call with you or has some other interaction that is still respecting everyone's time, but also some of the new normals we may still have in place at that time. So please know, we'd love to hear from you if you have thoughts on that, and we will be meeting with this board in June to talk about what those modifications will look like. Also, the one thing I want to remind you at the bottom here is as you are having, some of you are looking at opening up again, but many of you are having virtual events. We encourage you to invite our board members to those virtual events as well to give them an idea of how you are modifying your program, which we think is very helpful for them to know. All right, going back to the basics, just a quick reminder of the ZAP mission. Our mission is to enhance resident and visitor experiences through art, culture, and recreational offerings. So to this end, the ZAP Tier 1 and Zoological categories distribute over 16 million annually to 25 organizations. And thanks to the numbers you have shared with us, we can say this funding has reached more than 5 million attendees in Salt Lake County. Again, we will see a reduction to this number for this year, but we will be monitoring that and making sure we are communicating that with you all. So a quick review of some eligibility things you need to be aware of. You must be a 501c3 and have a nonprofit status. You must have an average 3-year qualifying expenses of $378,300. So this was raised in concert with the Consumer Price Index last year. So we account for inflation with this number. So the board chose to raise that slightly. And then you must have a main office located in Salt Lake County to qualify for Tier 1 status. For zoos, you must serve over 75,000 visitors per year and be working towards accreditation. And then finally, you must belong to a discipline that ZAP funds. So here is a quick list of the 17 disciplines we fund in Tier 1. You can also find a link to these on our website as well. Most of you on this call, I believe, understand what discipline you fit into. If you have any questions on this, though, we're always happy to talk through this with you, so please reach out to us. And Jen, I'm moving through this. If there's anything big I'm forgetting, or if there's any emergency comments I'm not seeing, feel free to jump in, okay? So, reminder of what ZAP does not fund. That big things we want to hit on here is ZAP does not fund events outside of Salt Lake County. So they must be, it doesn't mean you can't do events outside of Salt Lake County. We know many of you have touring programs, but we just ask that ZAP funding be used for events within the county. Another big thing is capital improvements. We technically have there are other sources of funding out there for that. We want this to go towards, operating expenses and things that are happening within the given year. Another thing is lobbying expenses. We ask that you would back that funding out as well and not use that funding towards that. We also don't fund things like re-granting, the other thing that is underlined here. Again, you may do that. Your organization may offer small grants to your community. We just ask that you do not use that funding for that. Other things you can see on here, activities primarily intended for fundraising, fireworks, sister city programs, rodeos. So it's kind of an interesting combo of things, but if you have any questions on any of this, throw that in the chat box or reach out to us afterwards. Okay, so with Tier 1, a quick review of some of the scoring criteria. And this scoring criteria is saved in the resource library in the online application, so you'll be able to grab it if you need it. We rank your applications in 5 areas: artistic vibrancy, which is 30% of your application; public benefit and outreach, which is 20% of your application; the governing board, which is another 20%, and then management organizational capacity, which is 15%, and then financial health is 16. I think that should say 15 though. I think this typo was in here last year. My apologies, everybody, but it is correct in the scoring criteria document. So within each of these categories, the Tier 1 board ranks you from a scale of 0, which is the lowest score, to 7, which is the highest. We find that many of our applicants, because of the wide range of categories we score, tend to fall in the 5 to 5.5 overall range. And then what we do after the review process is we can provide you with your scores and the board's commentary on your application, so you can see areas where you've excelled or areas where you might be able to improve in the next year. So if you are needing those scores and comments from us for last year's cycle, please reach out and let us know. Okay, a quick review of the application timeline and what our board's review process looks like. So the dates listed in red means that they have been modified simply to accommodate these extraordinary circumstances and allow you all more time to get your applications in. So the application opened in March of 2020. We moved this application workshop to May. We're also recording this and we'll make it available to you afterwards. The application deadline has been pushed to June 26th at 5:00 p.m. And then from there, we will take the applications. Jen and I will do our preliminary vetting, being sure to reach out to you if we have any questions, if we're missing any information. And then basically we will work with the board to make sure they have applications to review, or access to review the applications from July through September. And then in September, we will bring the board together to do their big board meeting where they finalize their all-day decisions. And again, we call that the all-day board meeting. Sometimes it takes all day, sometimes it doesn't. So then we will take those funding recommendations from the board to the county council, probably in late October, November for approval. This year, it is a little different. We will be pushing it slightly back to, again, accommodate for the later deadline. And then, excuse me, that actually will technically happen in December. I misspoke. So in December, the county council will approve, and then in January, we will push out our contracts to sign. So the last half of that timeline actually is the same this year. The biggest change is just making sure we gave you guys more time to submit your application. And then we wanted to talk through the funding timeline for 2020 because we always have questions about this. So Daniel Sturgio's put together this graphic for us. So you will receive your first disbursement in May, which is the equivalent of 2 payments. And then the rest of the disbursements you receive throughout this calendar year will all be the same amount. In September, we will most likely be checking in with you on what the projections this year will look like, if they're higher or lower. And then as we get closer to the new year, you will see in March, we will skip the disbursement because we will need that time to reconcile exactly where the dollars have landed. And then in April, you will see your last payment, which will be about a payment and a half's worth. So this is what your year looks like for funding disbursements. So we spread it out in 11 payments. And again, we could look, we will be monitoring projections throughout the year and be checking in with you if amounts, if we find the economy is really coming back, and we could possibly look at raising that, or if we need to make other adjustments. So we will stay on top of communication with you on that. Where's my next slide? Okay, so we're almost close to jumping into our online application. A couple of quick tips before we do that. These are things that come up every year. We just like to remind you is that we would, if you can, we ask that you whitelist or add as a safe sender notices at zoomgrants.com. This is where you're going to get confirmation of, you've started a new application, you've submitted an application. If there's announcements coming out from us, they will come through this email. So this is an important one to save. Also, if you're not the main application contact for your organization last year and don't have new credentials, please let us know because we will need to set you up with new credentials and update your organization. And then also, we'll go over this in the application, but don't forget to add any collaborators that need access to read your application or add in data or things like that. So this could include your director or your accountant. And again, the deadline for this year's application is Friday, June 26th at 5 p.m. Okay. So now to the exciting part, the online application. Let's see my notes really quick here. So again, most of you should have a Zoom Grants account already, but if you don't already have one, your organization can create and use one application with Zoom Grants for this grant. You can also give permission to multiple individuals to access and edit your application through the collaborators, and then each individual will need to create their own Zoom Grants account. So the owner of your application on Zoom Grants is the person who first creates it, and they are called the application contact. The application contact has full control over the application. They have access to and can edit every section, and their account is the only account that can actually invite other people to collaborate on the current application. They're also the only ones that can hit the submit button to submit the application when you are ready to go. So if you do not yet have a Zoom Grants account, you can create it when you go to the ZAP application, and we'll look at this in just a minute. If you already have used a Zoom Grants account in previous years to create or collaborate on the application, this is the account you will use to log in to create this year's application. So your credentials should be the same. But if you've forgotten your password for that account, please go to zoomgrants.com/login and click the gray forgot password link, and we'll show you where that is. So that's just the general stuff about getting in. So first, to create the application for this year, you can't go to Zoom Grants. You have to actually go to our website first. So you will go to zapisu.org. Let's get out of here. So when you go to the website, you're going to see our couple of announcements at the top talking about, where we are at with the county's risk in terms of moving through our reopening plan. There's some really helpful information here that Jen shared earlier on if you're looking for general status updates on what's happening at the county, what's happening with our facilities. Anyway, so scrolling down, you will go to either Tier 1 or the Zoo tab, it doesn't matter which one. You'll click into there, and then you're going to see under the Tier 1 heading a series of tabs. You're going to want to scroll to the Apply tab to access the application. So you can see some reminders here about our cycle and when the deadline is. To start a new application, you will click here. So I want to stress you only need to do this to start your application. Once you create a Zoom Grants application, you won't come back here. You will just log on to Zoom Grants every time. So I'm going to click this, and this is going to take me directly to Zoom Grants.
Hey, Kirsten, I think that your screen is not currently showing.
Oh, thank you. And actually, let me log out because this isn't right. Jen, can you see it now?
Yes, you are good to go. You may want to go all the way back to where you showed them on the ZAP page. I don't think that we caught anything before that or after that.
Can you see this web page now, Jen?
Yes, you are good to go.
Fabulous. I'll be fast, guys. Sorry about that. Okay, so to access the Tier 1 application and the Zoo application, go to our website, and you'll click on the Tier 1 button, or again, the Zoos button. So click here, and you'll go over to these tabs here, and you'll click on the tab that says Apply. You'll scroll down and hit this big blue button here, and that will start your application. Again, once you go here, to access the application, you can just go back to Zoom Grants. You only have to do this one time. And so this takes me right into Zoom Grants. So what you'll do is you're going to this will take you straight to the application, but it's going to ask you to log in. So I'm going to log in with my information that I have as a user. And then if you forgot your password, this is where you would click that. Jen, I think I'm looking at a different view in Zoom Grants, but it'll also give you the option. Oh, here we go. We're the big button down here. So the new Zoom Grants account, if you are new, so say you just started out your organization, you're the new grant writer, or you took on a new role, this is what you would click to create that. Once you create that, it'll take you back to the application. But because I already have credentials, I entered those in and I'm going to click login. So then you can see you're in the right place because it'll say the ZAP 2021 Tier 1 and Zoo application. You'll see here that this has all of the instructions and the requirements and eligibility we had just previously reviewed, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. But what you'll do to start, you're going to need to scroll down a little bit, about halfway down the page, and oh, no, it looks like it started an application for me. But Jen, what it would normally do is it would have a button around here that says start the application. Is that right, Jen?
Yes, it will. I've noticed that depends a little bit. Sometimes you'll see it and sometimes you won't. If you scroll down and you are actually able to type into these fields, you're good to go and you can start the application at that point. But if there is a button, go ahead and press it. I've seen it happen both ways.
Okay, great. So if you were trying to get in and it's being wonky for you, just give us shoot us an email and we'll help you out. So it looks like it already has started my application because you can see my information is populated. That's totally fine. So what you can start doing is filling this out. We organize this online application by tabs. We have the summary tab, which is largely contact information. And this is where you add collaborators, general eligibility, application questions, the data tab where we ask all about all your attendance numbers, and finally the documents tab. So I'm going to step through each of these really quick, and then we will pause for questions. So first, scrolling down for the summary, it will ask you to enter the application's title. That's a lot of save text. So one quick thing. When you are done typing a text, if you just simply need to click outside the box to save it. Many of you know that. We also, though, quickly, I will encourage you to save your text somewhere in a separate Word document, because we have seen instances where if the system has a lot of users on it, or if your connection is slow, we have seen people lose information. We don't want that to happen to you. So if you can make sure as you're typing, if you have this text, especially for the bigger questions, saved somewhere, that will really be to your advantage. So you'll go down, you'll enter any applicant information. If you have updated organization information, a different address, this is where you can update that. We'll want information, whoever your CEO or executive director is. And then the most important part about this tab is the collaborators section. This is where you can add whoever else you might need to. I'm bad at typing and talking, so I'm not going to do that. But this is where you can add an email of whoever else needs to see your application. So even if the nice thing is, you'll add the mail address, their name, their title, and then you have to make sure you click that they have access to edit the application. Otherwise, all they'll be able to do is view it, and then you'll click invite. And what this will do is this will shoot them an email, and it will walk them through how to get into the application. And if they don't have a Zoom Grants account, it'll take them through the steps of setting that up. So that's really nifty. So many times if your director or your accountant doesn't have access to see the application, it's because they have not been added to the collaborators section. And then down here, we'll ask for some additional information, your entity number, and then some other additional contact information. So then as you're moving through the application, you can always click on the next button at the bottom of the screen, or scroll back up to the tabs that are in the middle of the page. So now going to general eligibility. Again, this is a lot of information that it's going to carry over from year to year for your application. So this is where you would enter, your DBA. So if you're part of the university, but you function as, a museum or a separate program, you'd enter that here. Again, pretty straightforward stuff. If you have questions on any of this as you're going through this, please let us know. Again, we have you select your eligible discipline. This is the 12-month period that you're requesting for ZAP funding. So you will just look at last year's application and update that as needed. Number 8, this is informational only. We ask for this in the QE worksheet. It just helps us aggregate the information if you're receiving additional funding from the state. And then the required document here at the very bottom is the 501c3, your 501c3 designation letter. And again, you most likely have that attached, so you would have that attached to last year's application, so you can even grab it from there. So those first 2 tabs, very straightforward. A lot of the same information that you'll have submitted last year. Now, moving on to the next tab, one thing that is always, once I have these instructions down, I don't need to read them again. So I like to hide these. Well, of course, we want you to read them. It's easier to hide them, so then you can see the tabs a little bit better as you're moving between, general eligibility application questions. I will quickly stop and say one thing I didn't talk about was the resources library. So this will be at the top of each page unless you hide it. So the majority of these links are here to basically assist you with your application. The one thing you'll really want to pay attention to is the required 2021 ZAP qualifying expenditures worksheet. So this is an Excel template you'll have to download. And again, we'll walk through that at the end of this presentation. But some other really cool things on here is tips and tricks for Zoom grants, which Jen has put together. This will answer probably 90% of your questions should you run into any problems with Zoom grants. It has been really helpful for us to answer questions even if we forget certain things. So I highly encourage you to download this and share this with people, anyone at your organization who needs to work on the Zoom grants application. Oops. Okay, I went into a hole. Okay, it's not letting me go back, so let me go somewhere else in the application. Okay, so sorry, back to the resource library. We have the county council district map to help you map out where your activities have been, because we ask about that. Here's a link to the definitions of the disciplines we fund. Here's where you can search for your entity number. We've included a sample board list for you, because this is something we do ask for every year. You don't have to use this as a template. It's just an optional thing to view. One other thing with our board member list is we no longer ask for personal addresses because we can't collect that anymore, but we do ask that you list which county council district they are in, if that's applicable. We have some new accounting pronouncements that, again, this is a reference for you all. As we've seen the accounting standards change, we want to make sure you understand what that looks like in this sum setup. Guidelines, please download this and use this as you're writing the application. And then we went over these last 2. So just a quick overview of our resource library. Okay, also into the application questions. So this is the meat of your application. Again, this is as you type and click outside of the field, it should be saving it for you. So a lot hasn't changed. There's a couple of updates I'll touch on, but you're going to be able to use last year's application to really structure a lot of this for you. So that's really probably your best guide. The first thing here, Jen, with the video sample artifact, you had mentioned something specific. What did we want to remind people about with this first thing? And this is optional.
Yeah, absolutely. Kristen, if you could click the show hide next to the video sample artifact. So you'll want to, if you're not used to putting this in here, some of you may have done this year to year and you already know exactly how to do it. But you'll want to take a second to read this carefully. You're not putting in a URL, you're putting in an HTML embed code. You can get this from YouTube videos and from Vimeo videos by going to their share option and clicking the embed option that they have there. But if you're unsure how to do this, there is a URL here that's embed.ly/code. You'll open that up in a browser and then you'll copy in the URL for your video. And then that will give you the HTML code of which you'll have to copy all of it to put it in here. So this brings a video player window into your application for the board members when they're going through your application, so they can watch it right there without having to open it up in an additional window. So just be sure you're not, or the person who's working on your application on this portion of it isn't putting in an HTML code there. Is not putting in the URL. it needs to be the HTML code for the embed code. And if they're having any trouble with that, just have them send me an email real fast and I can walk them through it real quick.
So Jen is our resident expert on this, these embed artifact codes. So please reach out to her if you get into any hangups with this. Thanks, Jen. All right, so the first question we ask here is, what is your board's approved mission statement, or your organization's approved mission statement? We intentionally put this at the top to give our reviewers the right frame of mind when going in to review your application. So from there, we'll jump into the 3 different sections we have, or sorry, the 5 different sections. I'm confusing applications. Starting with artistic vibrancy. So what we try to be really intentional about is showing you and the board that this is, when the board considers artistic vibrancy, their score is going to be made up of the criteria you see here. So this question, in addition to some of the attachments. So we want it to be really transparent on both sides what is being evaluated. So the big question we have here is, describe how your organization's program can contribute to an artistically vibrant community in Salt Lake County. So this was updated a couple years ago, or maybe last year, but we really wanted to lean more into getting into the niche of what it is your organization does so well, and why it matters. Used to say, describe your major programs, but we are assuming that that is covered in the executive summary sheet we ask you to submit every year. Going down to public benefit and outreach, again, this is 20% of your score, and we outline here what is considered as part of this. We ask, as part of this section, we ask, tell us a story from a past year of a moment when it was clear that your organization impacted the community. This is a carryover question and has been for several years. This is we've heard from you that this is a fun question to write, and our board members love reading it. So this is a really great anecdotal way to drive home, the numbers you are sharing, and it's a great specific example we hear board members bring up again and again that really can help crystallize what your organization does. Going into number 4, describe your organization's effort to reach underserved communities in Salt Lake County with its work. I believe we have slightly updated this from last year for the Tier 1 application, where we want to hear more from you about not just how you are serving the community and how you are continuing to serve the community, but how are you serving underserved communities? And so we ask you to define, as part of this question, which communities you're serving, which steps have been taken, and how you plan to expand equitable reach of your efforts. So this is where we want you to highlight some of that work. Jen, anything to add to this question? Because I think it is a slight shift from last year.
I think this is covered already.
Okay, great. So 5, this is a carryover from previous years. Describe one partnership. This question works best if you truly do pick one partnership. We know many of you, all of you, are doing amazing work and have lots of partners, but this also is another way to help us crystallize how a strategic partnership has helped you expand your reach into the community, like how it has increased your benefit to the public. Also, if you have more than one partnership you want to highlight, we do allow you to attach an additional list of partnerships in the Documents tab, and I'll show you that in a moment. So that covers it for public benefit. Yeah, I'm not going to spend any more time on that. Moving into our governing board section, we have a couple questions here as well. Again, it tells you specifically what we're looking for when evaluating this question. But number 6, one thing I want to highlight here. This is a carryover question with a slight tweak. We say, describe any efforts and progress your organization has made towards increasing the diversity of your staff and board of directors. This used to just ask about your board of directors, but we wanted to expand the question this year because we know many of you are really making some really fabulous strides with your staff, and we want to highlight that more. So we understand your staff and your board of directors, they serve very different functions for your organization, but we wanted to give you the opportunity to speak to either or both. So that is a shift this year. Number 7, this is a carryover. What is your organization's fundraising policy as related to board members? This is basically wanting to understand a little bit more about your give or get policy to help us really kind of understand the culture of your board and what that looks like. And then moving into management and organizational capacity. Couple questions here. These are carryover. We say describe your board's succession planning efforts for key staff. That is a carryover, again, the same question. Number 9, what are your organization's key goals and objectives for the next 3 to 5 years? This used to say 5 years. We just simply tweaked it to say 3 to 5 because we understand long range planning is getting a lot shorter these days because of how quickly our world is evolving. And again, with some of these questions, we understand that in light of where we're at now in dealing with COVID and the challenges you are all facing, some of these questions are going to look very different from when you submit them in June to when we review them in the fall to when we begin your first payments, at next year. So please know, as you're filling this out overall, we understand that things will change, and we just ask that you give us the information to the best of your ability you can. And then finally, moving down into financial health. This score is actually not determined by the board. This score is determined by our independent CPA, who takes your QE worksheet, compares it to your audits, and then generates a financial health test score for you. So just to help us with aggregating this and with looking at everything, the only thing we're asking for here is that you provide your total revenue from your most recently completed fiscal year and your total QE. And this is going to be from the 2019 tab, so the most recently completed fiscal year. And then as part of the section, we also ask you to describe any related party transactions which occurred in the last year. If they were listed on your audit, they really should be listed here. If they are under $5,000, the board does not worry about those, but if they are over $5,000, the board does in policy have the ability to consider those, and if the related party transaction makes sense, they could choose to vote to include it as part of your qualifying expenses, which helps your award, or they could vote to disallow it. And there is a process for that that we can talk about a little bit later. So then finally, as part of your application, we close out with a couple of 2020 evaluation questions. So this is our way of not having you don't have to submit 2 separate documents to us. This is how we satisfy that requirement. So the first question here is describe how ZAP funds were utilized in the past year. So that, that's a quick, that should also tie to your QE worksheet. We have a tab at the end of it that says actual use. So we want those 2 to match as much as possible. And if there's any discrepancies, you can also explain it here as well. And then 13, describe the internal, external challenges you faced during the past year and how your organization addressed them. So that this is really an opportunity to highlight the good work you've been doing, and especially as we move into future years, where you can, talk about the ways your organization has pivoted. And 14, what has your organization accomplished in the past year that you're most proud of? So trying to finish on a positive note here. So we know many of you you have many things to put here, but we're just asking for one to help us understand the success from your last year. Okay, so clicking next and hiding all of this, we should now be in the data tab. So this is the same as last year. So my biggest thing I'm only going to say on this section is that as you're scrolling through this, look at last year's numbers, and then you're just simply looking to update things. Some of you have reached out with questions on these and how you calculate them. Let us know if what you're seeing last year doesn't make sense. I know many of you calculate these in different ways. Our biggest urging to you, our biggest thing that we like to stress is that you just simply be consistent within your own organization. And if you want to change how you're counting something in terms of, numbers of members served or artists who have participated, you're welcome to do so. It can be helpful if we're seeing a big shift from year to year, if you can explain that in the questions part of your application. But again, I just urge you to refer to last year, how you counted these numbers last year. So moving into the document section, for Tier 1, we require you to attach a lot of documents, and we appreciate all the work that goes into this. So the first one is the qualifying expenditure worksheet. So what you're going to download is going to be a blank worksheet. And I believe some of the formulas really they are locked to prevent formulas from being messed with. But we have you fill that out, and then you would upload it here. And then just, oh, okay, ignore that. And then when you click on this button, it'll bring up an additional window, and that's actually where you will have the ability to upload more than one document or delete any documents you've erroneously uploaded. We also asked for the past 3 audits from your organization. We know many of you this year might run into delays with getting your audit completed. So in the past, people, they have been great about letting us know on that. So if any of you are seeing challenges there, reach out to me separately. It just always, helps for us to be aware of those things. So then we want your 2018 and 2017 audit should also be included in past applications if you need to go and grab them. We also require everyone to submit an auditor's peer review letter. This is something very straightforward. It's a 1-page letter your auditor will have on hand that certifies that they have been reviewed by an outside auditor, saying that they are okay, they're complying with GAAP, and that they are good to go. So this is, if you don't have this is something that you should be able to get from your auditor very quickly. They should have this on hand. Okay, we also ask everybody to upload an organization chart. And this is required this year. I don't know if we've asked for this or if it was required last year, but we now require it. And also, in addition to that, the board list, which we talked about with that sample list tab. We require you to upload a current season brochure, and that, this helps us understand your programming. And then we also ask you to upload verification for Now Playing Utah. The great thing about this is when you upload items, you have the ability to attach it as a document or a link, and then you could simply link to a past event, and that would satisfy that requirement. We also ask you, sorry, I lost my place, to upload samples of your use of the ZAP logo. So if this was a season brochure, if this is a flyer, if this is a photo, whatever that looks like. And then this is optional, but visual documentation that can include videos, images, things like that. Also optional if you have an annual report or another big report that you would like to share with us to enhance our understanding of your organization, great. And then this is the 1-page executive summary of your organization. So you'll have this probably from year to year, and this is something you can update and upload. We want you to think of this as a 1-page resume for your organization, highlighting your major programs. So this is also a really good cheat sheet for our board members to say, okay, here's what they do, and then compare it to the application of, okay, here's where they're being awesome. And then finally, this is where you can upload a list of partnerships if you'd like to include that. So then, after you have filled out all of these tabs, you can go back to the summary tab and say you've had everybody review it and you're in a really good place with it. You should be able to scroll down, and there should be a gray submit application button. I'm not seeing this here, but it will be. Jen, where does this typically appear? Is it on every page?
So it's here up at the top. It should be on every page. Christian, if you scroll up back to the tabs, it'll be over on the right side of the tab, and it should show up once you have completed.
Okay, so it'll show up here. Is that right?
It's at the top.
Okay, so it'll show. So over here, you're saying?
A little bit lower right there where it says summary, along there over to the right hand side where you can see that activity log gray square.
Right.
In that area you will see a submit application button once you've gone through to fill things out. And if you have not filled out everything and uploaded everything, when you click submit, it'll bring up a long list, or hopefully a short list, of red text telling you exactly which question or section you need before you can submit it.
Fabulous. Thank you. Thank you. So that is our brief tour of the application. I want to go back and just see if there are at this point, if you have any questions for us before we jump into the really exciting Excel sheet, then are you seeing any questions come through?
Nope, not yet.
Okay.
Just a minute.
Hopefully you're not all half asleep. Okay. So moving on to the QE worksheet, I'm going to take you through a couple of overview slides and then we'll go into the workbook itself. So a couple of things to know is
we just had a question come through from Jessica Proctor. She had asked, are there any recommendations or places where we should talk specifically about our COVID-19 response within the application?
sorry, the COVID-19 response and what?
Where they should talk specifically about their COVID-19 response in the application. Is there anywhere in there that we would like for them to highlight that effort?
Oh, yes, good question. I think there's multiple places where you could actually do that. If you were talking about, really in the financial stability section, like now, of course, I've been looking at it, but it's, but where they're asking about, you know, what your long range, you're planning for the next 3 to 5 years. I think that is a key area where you could touch on that because a lot of your long range planning is probably about to change a bit. Where you're talking about, you know, in the public benefit section, if there's anything you're doing, even if you've had to shift gears and you're doing programming differently, you could speak to how those COVID efforts are helping, you know, serving the community. You know, I think you can be really creative, and I would actually encourage all of you to look at those different sections as opportunities of where can we touch on COVID, like especially in the governing board section. Like, you know, we talk about, I would say you would be okay to take liberties and saying, okay, well, this is my opportunity in addition to talking about, you know, here's how my board of directors are diverse or how they're trying to step up during the COVID efforts, or even in the give or get, you know, question, like what ways have they stepped up or what unique things are they looking at? So I actually, I think you could definitely talk about it in the long range planning question, but also it could go throughout the application as well. Anything else? Any other questions, Jen?
I think that's it for now.
Awesome. Okay. So going into the QE worksheet, again, you're going to grab this from the resource library, and it'll be a blank worksheet. I'm sorry, it won't have your previous year's financial information populated. In future years, I would love to address that because I know it can be kind of a headache to update, but thank you for going through that with us every year. So the qualifying worksheet will have 12 tabs total. Half of these are instruction, so you're really only updating a few tabs in here with new information, I should say. So the first tab has general information, so those are some overview instructions for you. The second tab goes into specific definitions and what we mean when we're asking for a certain expense in terms of, you know, program expenses, depreciation, things like that. And then 3 goes into the third tab, will go into non-qualifying definitions. So that goes into some more detail about what specifically you need to back out of your worksheet and what we don't fund. And then the tabs 4, 5, and 6 are that's where the numbers are, that's where the bulk of the work will be. So tab 4 is your 2019 QE worksheet. This will be the new data you're entering. This should tie directly to your most recently completed financial audit. And then the other 2 tabs, your 2018 QE worksheet, you're going to carry that, you're going to grab that from your most recently completed worksheet and input those numbers into that tab. And the same for 2017. Now, I know this year, many of you, I had some questions about political lobbying expenses, specifically what was paid for the ZAP Tier 1 authorization group or the Tier 1 advisory board. And so we have listed those, and then many of you reached out and said, no, we have paid ahead. So we were able to back that out. So a lot of you might have a change for that, but most of you won't. So if you have a question about what is the most up-to-date worksheet, please email me and we will verify that together so you're working with the most up-to-date data. Some of you will have corrections that our CPA has had to make simply because something didn't tie to your audit or something didn't add up right. And so that will be a revised number. You'll also want to make sure you have that version. So again, let me know if you're uncertain of what version you should be using. After those 3 tabs, we go into the summary page definitions. Again, just some helpful instruction. And then the summary worksheet, tab 8. The majority of this is going to pull from those previous worksheets from 2019, 2018, and 2017. There will just be a top section that you'll have to fill out regarding revenue. And then the 9th tab is where you would add in numbers from how funds in 2019 were spent. So this is where we would say, okay, what did you do with the money? Did it all go towards salaries? Was it for programming expenses? Was it across the board? And then 10 is an optional, the 10th tab is an optional cap calculation sheet. This is where you would input your numbers to calculate your rent cap, your salary cap, if there's a concessions cap or for theaters, a commission cap. That's optional. You can use your own formulas, but we would just make sure we are verifying those on our end. And then the 11th tab is reconciliations. This is only if the numbers in your QE worksheet do not match your financial audit. This is where you would reconcile that. And finally, 12, explanations. This is optional, but if you have a lot to explain that can't fit on the individual year tabs, you could put that in there as well. A couple of things to keep in mind with the QE worksheet. The average qualifying expenditure minimum this year, the threshold has been raised to $378,800. Most of you all well exceed that threshold, and you'll be able to see that when you fill out your worksheet. The salary cap is currently set at $97,280. This is the same as last year. The year 2018 and 2017 sheet should match any changes made by the ZAP program. So what I was talking about earlier with our CPA making revisions. And then again, please back out all lobbying and fundraising expenses. You guys are great about this, just a reminder. And then finally, a reminder about the new financial accounting pronouncements. That is that handout I was referring to in the resource library. It just gives a high level overview of the changes that have come through in the last 3 years that nonprofits have to implement as part of the presentation in their audits. Again, your auditors are going to be on top of this. They're going to be aware of this. We just want to make sure we're helping on our end. Things we really, really would like you to explain in the QE worksheet is any miscellaneous programs. So some of you could have a really high dollar amount listed there. If you do, that's when we'd like to see an explanation of what exactly does that mean. Is that an outreach program? Is that a touring thing? Like, what is that? Miscellaneous administration expenses, other expenditures, and then include administrative and other salary details. So really, what all of this is getting at is if this is seemingly a high number, anything you can do to help illustrate what that number means is really appreciated. And then I'm going to go back to related party transactions. I touched on this in the application, but these, if they are a material amount, should be included in your audit. And so the board examines, again, any amount listed over $5,000. This is something they have the ability by policy to vote as, okay, we can include this as part of your operating expenses, or we could disallow it. And then in the worksheet, which I'll show you in a minute, we actually walk through some instructions about if you would like to include a related party transaction, here's the requirements you have to satisfy. So I'll show you that in just a moment. And this is an overview of the summary tab, but I'm going to go into the workbook to show you better. And then Jen, can you see this Excel worksheet?
Yep, you are good.
Okay, so this is the worksheet itself. Once you'll download it, you can see here are the very many tabs across the bottom. So everything I just walked you through. Okay, so what you'll want to do is you're going to spend most of your time in the 2019, 2018, 2017, and the summary tab. regarding related party transactions, if you will go into one of these tabs, I want to say we listed in here in terms of how you can include a related party transaction. And what I'm not remembering exactly what tab it is, but what I'll do is I will just follow up with information on that, and we'll list that. I'll make sure that goes into the application under in the instructions area. So I'll make sure that that goes there in terms of looking at what you need to satisfy, including a related party transaction. Okay, but back to the worksheet. So again, this 2019 tab is where you will take your most recently completed audit and include, looking at your cash flow statement, looking at your balance sheet, you're going to come in and you're going to include those expenses here. This is where, and this is where, as you walk through, you would back out expenses for non-eligible activity. So this is where, if you knew off the top, you couldn't include it if it's in that list of definitions that of things we don't fund. And then we would require explanations if we needed one. If you felt like there needed something that needed to be explained, if you have a question about it, we ask that you would include that here. So that helps us understand. And then this is the column where you would back out any expenses that are not expended within Salt Lake County. And then another area, opportunity to provide an explanation. And then down here, we would have you update your administrative salary detail and then your other salary detail. So you can refer to your last year's QE worksheets on what those numbers look like and use that as your guide, really. And then in this last part here, this is another area where we'll have you back out expenses that are non-qualifying. So capital construction depreciation, things like that. If you are giving out grants, any caps. So if you exceeded the salary cap of 92,000, yada, yada, this is where you would include that excess. If you exceed the rent cap in the excess of 6% of this number this total up here, you would back that out here and things like that. So that'll calculate your qualifying expenses minus the non-allowable stuff. And then you would list your ZAP award from 2019. If you need to confirm that number with us, please let us know. And then that will spit out your 2019 QE number. So that is a really, really very messy walkthrough. And if you are working with your accountant or your auditor, they're pretty familiar with this. But I just want to make sure you have a kind of a brief understanding of what the nitty-gritty of this worksheet. So then for 2018 and 2017, this is where you're going to go through and grab those expenditures from your last completed QE worksheet. And then finally, briefly looking at the summary worksheet, this is where it all comes together. We'll have you fill out some revenue summaries. And so again, you can take these from your last year's QE worksheets, and then this would be new for 2019. So you'll grab these from your most recently completed audit. And then down here, this is all a formula. Nope, see, it's not letting me mess with it, but it will tell you that it will pull the numbers from those 3 completed worksheets. And then it's going to spit out your 3-year qualifying number here, which is what we most care about. So this is where you want to make sure this amount is is greater than $378,300. And again, another area here where you can offer an explanation if you don't want to include it in the explanation tab. So that is really high level, a kind of a rough look at the qualifying expenditures worksheet. I can go back to that if we need to, but really that concludes that section of it. Are there any questions on the QE worksheet? Any comments? Okay. One thing I will say is that with this, with the QE worksheet, our Tier 1 Advisory Board is always looking at ways to make sure it makes sense and we are equitably distributing funding within the Tier 1 pool. And so One thing they would like to do this year, which will be put on pause because of the impacts we are seeing from COVID, is they are carefully wanting to look at the QE worksheet and making sure that the way things are laid out is fair and the way the funding is calculated is fair. So this is something we had done back in it might have been 2015, but every several years, this is something the board looks at and just wants to make sure that they are doing right by the tier 1 group. So I just want to stress with that while the board is implementing no changes to the qualifying expenses right now, it has no immediate future plans to do so. This is something that is on the top of their mind. And if you have any feedback on this, and especially as we move into the next few years, as we see people recovering from COVID, we will be reaching out to you all to get your feedback and any ideas you might have on making sure we are the application process in the QE worksheet is fair and reasonable. So if there are no other questions, I think that is everything in our webinar. Jen, is there anything else you would like to add that I maybe am forgetting?
I think that covers everything. For all of the groups here, there was one thing that I just wanted to mention. As you have events that are coming up, whether they are, especially if they're online, we just wanted to make sure everybody knows that we have edited our board invitation form so that it includes online events as well. So that's something to have your event people and marketing people take a look at if it's something that you'd like the board members to see. Some of the online activities that you have been moving to over the past little bit to still reach your communities.
Awesome. Jen, thank you so much. And please, if there's a question that pops up later, shoot us an email, reach out to me. Again, we want to hear from you. We know this is a really weird year, but overall, we know we'll be looking backwards at the past 3 years of your wonderful work with this review cycle and understanding that next year is going to have to look and will be different, and we will be prepared to be supportive and flexible as much as we can. So thank you all for your time. Thank you all for doing another Zoom WebEx meeting when you've done so many. We hope you all have a great day, and we welcome any and all questions you have. So thanks everybody, and take care.